In this passage of Oliver Twist, Oliver has just been shot while being a part of a robbery with Fagin and Sykes. So Fagin and Sykes don't know what to do after Oliver's shot, so they leave him in a ditch and they run. So Oliver finds a house, he goes inside, and it just happens to be the same house that they were robbing. So this passage is about that family caring for Oliver and making sure that he's okay. In this passage, Charles Dickens uses syntax, imagery, and diction to help express the intensity of the situation. For example, Dickens uses broken syntax, and here's an example right here, to represent how people actually speak in real life. And it also represents the panic and the scattered thoughts of the people that were involved in the accident. A lot of the time, when you are under stress, you might not be able to connect your thoughts as well as usual, and that just makes it more realistic because that is what actually happens in real life. So here, when Giles says this sentence, it's very broken up, doesn't quite go together. It just shows the thought process that is going on in his head. Another example is here, when Brittles and Giles are talking to each other, but they kind of interrupt each other and they talk at the same time. And that is also another thing that people do quite often. And so the broken syntax really helps to show the people talking fast over top of each other, and it makes the scene feel more realistic because that is how people actually talk in life, especially under stressful situations. Imagery is also used in this passage to show the difference in reactions between the more level-headed females and the high-stressed males. As you can tell, Giles and Brittles, who are the butler and handyman of the house, are very stressed, and like here it says, they utter a loud cry, and they are screaming. Charles Dickens uses a lot of exclamation points, so you can tell that the men of the house are more stressed and they don't quite know how to handle this situation. But the women are more level-headed and soft-spoken and relaxed, as it says here, soft and gentle as the voice. And you can tell by this imagery that the women of the house are more motherly and they know how to handle this kind of situation. Another example of that imagery is here, where it says, "There was heard a sweet female voice," which shows what Oliver was feeling, and it represents that sense of comfort that Oliver hasn't really felt in his life at all throughout the novel. And he's currently laying there with a bullet in his arm, and so this imagery of a sweet female voice kind of brings a comfort to Oliver that is really needed at this time in the story. Along with syntax and imagery, Charles Dickens also uses hopeless diction. It makes the reader feel for Oliver because after everything he's been through, he also gets shot. I mean, what else could go wrong? He uses words such as the ones I've highlighted: desperate, thief, wounded, poor. All of these words represent a general feeling of what Oliver has experienced during the novel. He is treated like a thief just because he fell in with the wrong crowd. He's wounded not only physically, but mentally and emotionally because he doesn't know who his family is, and he's been mistreated over and over again. He's desperate all throughout the novel to find out where he came from and what his identity is. And he's poor because he not only doesn't have any money, he lives on the streets, he has no one that loves him, and he just goes about life doing what he thinks is right, but he's really been pointed in the wrong direction by these people that he's met, such as Sikes and Fagin. They have messed up his judgment and made him into a criminal, which is really not what he is. These words that Dickens has chosen to use really represent that hopelessness that is a main point throughout the entire novel. Oliver is desperate for food, for a home, for love. He is assumed to be a thief because of the people he hangs out with. He is wounded physically, emotionally, mentally. But it's only because of how he's been raised, how he's grown up in an orphanage, on the streets, with people who are criminals, people who are not good role models. And this diction just represents that hopeless feeling that Oliver feels all throughout the novel. But it also shows that no matter what people think about him, no matter how desperate he may be, he continues to fight, he continues to survive. His ability to survive through all the struggles that he's been through just makes the character of Oliver Twist even more interesting, even more lovable. And Dickens uses this dramatic diction to really draw in the reader, make them feel bad for Oliver, make them feel what he's feeling. And he's only a boy, so the fact that he has been going through all of these things in his life, not really knowing who he is, not having a steady home or people that love him, it makes his triumph even more spectacular and rewarding at the end of the novel. In this passage of Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens uses broken syntax, imagery, and hopeless diction to really pull in the reader and help them become a part of Oliver's story. Throughout the whole novel, Charles Dickens creates these incredible characters and this fascinating story that is clearly fiction, but he makes it seem so real that the reader really just gets pulled into Oliver's emotional life. The syntax makes the characters seem so realistic, and it represents, what could actually happen in this situation. The imagery brings the characters to life as well, with their kind words, their soft voices. It really helps the reader to feel like they're there. And the diction that Dickens uses is a wonderful example of the dramatic story and the struggles that Oliver goes throughout his life. And it really makes the reader feel for him, and it creates these emotions in a fictional character that doesn't always happen with stories that are not true. So in that sense, I feel Charles Dickens did a really wonderful job writing this story, because he brings it to life. He brings the characters to life, even though it is a fiction novel.